Imagine standing on the moon, looking back at Earth. Sounds impossible, right? But it actually happened. Or did it? July 20th, 1969. A small spacecraft gently touched down on the lunar surface. Inside were two astronauts, preparing to make history. Exiting the tiny module wasn't simple. The cabin was cramped, the door was stiff, and during the process, a crucial engine ignition switch was accidentally broken. If that switch hadn't been bypassed, the spacecraft would never leave the moon. Despite the risk, one astronaut stepped down first, becoming the first human to walk on another world. His words echoed across Earth. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Yet more than 50 years later, many people still question whether humans really walked on the moon. They point to waving flags, missing stars, and unusual shadows. But each of these claims has straightforward scientific explanations. To understand why the moon landing happened, you have to understand the time. This wasn't just a scientific mission. It was the height of the Cold War. In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. In 1961, they sent the first human into space. The United States was falling behind. In response, President John F. Kennedy made a bold promise. Before the decade ended, Americans would land on the moon and return safely. This was 1961. There were no personal computers, no internet, and no GPS. Yet billions of dollars were poured into NASA. Rockets were tested, spacecraft redesigned, and entirely new technologies invented from scratch. The Apollo missions gradually built toward the final goal. First unmanned tests, then crewed flights, then full rehearsals of a moon landing. On July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 launched atop the Saturn V rocket, a 110-meter-tall machine weighing nearly 3 million kilograms. Within minutes, it reached orbit and began its journey to the moon. After nearly 4 days in space, the spacecraft entered lunar orbit. 2 astronauts climbed into the lunar module and detached, while a third remained above, orbiting the moon alone. As they descended, unexpected alarms sounded. Mission Control quickly assessed the situation and told them to continue. Just 150 meters above the surface, the commander took manual control to avoid a field of large boulders. With less than 30 seconds of fuel remaining, the lunar module touched down safely. Over 650 million people around the world watched as the first human stepped onto the moon. Soon after, the second astronaut joined him. Together, they collected rock samples, deployed scientific instruments, and took photographs that would become some of the most famous images in history. Against the odds, they splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. Still, doubts remain. So let's address the most common questions. Why hasn't anyone gone back to the moon if it was done in 1969? Because it was never easy. The Apollo missions were driven by Cold War urgency and massive funding. Once the goal was achieved, political motivation faded. The technology wasn't lost. It was simply too expensive to continue without a clear purpose. Today's missions focus on long-term exploration, not brief visits. Could the moon landing have been faked in a studio? In 1969, computer graphics didn't exist, and even Hollywood couldn't convincingly fake low-gravity movement, lunar dust behavior, or consistent lighting across thousands of images. More than 400,000 people worked on Apollo, keeping a secret that large would have been nearly impossible. Why didn't the Soviet Union accuse the United States of faking the landing? Because they were tracking the mission themselves. Soviet radar and tracking stations followed Apollo 11 all the way to the moon. If the landing had been fake, exposing it would have been a massive propaganda victory. Instead, the Soviets publicly congratulated the US. Why do astronauts leave clear footprints if there's no water on the moon? Lunar dust is made of sharp, jagged particles created by billions of years of meteor impacts. When compressed, those particles lock together, allowing footprints to hold their shape without moisture. Why do some photos look too perfect? The moon has no atmosphere, no clouds, no weather, no haze. That creates extreme clarity. Astronauts were also trained in photography, and the lighting conditions were far simpler than on Earth. And is there physical proof on the moon today? Yes. Modern spacecraft from NASA, India, Japan, and China have photographed Apollo landing sites. You can still see descent stages, equipment, and even astronauts walking paths exactly where they were left. Since Apollo 17 in 1972, no human has returned to the moon. But that's about to change through the Artemis program. NASA plans to send astronauts, including the first woman and the first person of color, back to the lunar surface. The moon landing wasn't just a giant leap for mankind. It was proof that humans can solve impossible problems when ambition, science, and courage come together. And even after more than half a century, the moon still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered.